Welcome to the Trauma Survivorhood podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Miley, an IFS-informed certified trauma recovery coach. This show features interviews from survivors all over the world as they share their impactful story of thriving in their post-traumatic growth. We explore resources, tools, and coping skills to support the trauma survivor community. Enjoy. Welcome back to the Trauma Survivorhood podcast. I am your host, Sarah Miley. I am an IFS-informed trauma recovery and lifestyle design coach, and I have with us today two of my new friends, Itto and Mekiya Outini. And I want to start first. We're going to talk about both of their stories and their journeys, but also they now work together. So we're going to read each of their bios, and then I'm going to also read the bio for their new project that they work on together. So Itto is a journalist, a writer, public speaker, Fulbright Scholar, and a Steinbeck and McDowell Fellow. Her work has appeared in the Chicago Tribune, the Fulbright Chronicle, the Relatable Voice magazine, and her story has been featured on the BBC. She has spoken at Caltech University, the UN, and the International Trade Center. She holds an MA in journalism and strategic media from the University of Arkansas. Mekiya is an author, editor, and a McDowell Fellow as well, with an MFA in fiction from the University of Arkansas. His short story, Baptism by Earth, won the 55th New Millennial Award in fiction, and his work has appeared in the Coachella Review, Willow Springs, and other places. Together, they are the founding editors of DateKeepers, an international media platform. Their current book projects include Itto's memoir, which is called Blindness is the Light of My Life, an essay collection by Mekiya, and a comic novel, amongst other things. So you guys are doing a lot of stuff. I want to just dive in to your story. I want to hear, where have you guys been and how did you get to where you are now?
Sure. Yeah. Did you want me to go first? Yeah. Okay. So, Itto and I are together now, and it took a lot for us to find each other because we both we're not only are we from different countries and different cultures on different sides of the ocean, but we also were raised each on the outskirts of our own respective cultures as outsiders looking in, and neither one of us ever felt at home at or was welcomed into the mainstream societies in our own countries, and that may be part of the reason that we found each other. And I've traveled abroad. I have not lived outside of the US, but I have formed some of my closest relationships with Itto, but also with other people who came here from abroad. And then also in my editorial work, I specialize in supporting people who are working in English as a foreign language. So I have always had a bit more of an affinity with outsiders. I was raised by parents who themselves had dropped out of the mainstream society. They both had a lot of childhood trauma themselves, very different types of trauma, but both very intense trauma. And when they were in college, they met each other. They were indulging in a lot of alcohol, a lot of drugs. And they convinced them, I was going to say, I think, but actually I know that they convinced themselves that they broke their family cycles, that they rejected all the things their families were doing wrong. They rejected domestic abuse. They rejected violence. They rejected materialism and consumerism. And they sold all of their possessions and lived in a van for a few months. And then I guess they found out that I was coming along and they ended up getting married. And but the problem was they had not actually worked through their trauma. They had not actually. So I grew up raised inside this narrative that I was the beneficiary of all of their work. And they homeschooled me for 16 years in Asheville, North Carolina. We didn't know anybody in Asheville. Until I was 7, I didn't have any interaction with other kids. From the ages of 7 to 12, I had only one friend who was about my age. And then I did start, I got involved in a martial arts community, which was a very strange subculture. I got involved in a homeschool group, which was another rather strange subculture. But those were my only interactions with the outside world. Live in person. And meanwhile, my parents convinced themselves that they had broken their family cycles, but they still had alcohol addiction, which was not acknowledged. It was not acknowledged as they did not acknowledge themselves to be addicts. And I really only figured that out gradually. They successfully broke the cycle of physical abuse, and they were very proud of that. And they often reminded me how lucky I was not to have been physically abused by either of them. And that is true. Neither one of them ever physically abused me in any way, but they psychologically abused me.
Mm.
And I grew up not realizing that psychological abuse. Well, I think actually the funny thing is I saw it in others that it was a type of abuse, but I didn't recognize it in myself.
Right.
My father had a lot of anger issues, which are understandable given his family history. Um, he had no real outlet for them, so he would sometimes sit and yell at me for 2 or 3 hours, maybe like 2 or 3 times a week. And my mother was not somebody who would step in and intervene. My mother would sit passively and quietly watching and sometimes reinforcing what he said in a calmer voice. And
Mm.
so that was what I was conditioned to be used to. And I had no like points of reference with other families or other kids to see whether that was normal or not. So
Right.
yeah, so their narrative for me was that I had the best childhood, and of course, the corollary to that is anything that happens to me in my life that is not good, any mental health issues I might experience, etc., must be by my own doing because it couldn't possibly be anything that they did to me. So
Mm.
I did, of course, start to experience a lot of severe depression, anxiety, insomnia. I worked my way through undergrad and grad school, but by the time I was in the middle of grad school, I didn't know why I was doing it anymore because the things that had been meaning to me had lost meaning. I've always loved stories because books were the only real way I had to connect with the outside world when I was growing up, and I fell in love with literature very early.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that bonds me and Itto, even though she had no access to books at an early age. And she'll tell you that part of her story. It's fascinating. But um, we both are storytellers and love stories, and now both love books very deeply. But I lost my love for storytelling and books, and I lost my faith in literature as a transformative. Um, I lost my faith in its transformative capacity when I was in grad school because I was so depressed it wasn't working anymore. And it was really only meeting Itto and getting together with her that gave me a sense of hope because one of the core elements of my trauma was an inability to connect with others. And the name that I could put on that was that I couldn't find a romantic relationship. Like that was the tangible um like incarnation of that was obviously missing, and it was easier to name it. So that's what I always thought it was, but I think it was actually much deeper. I think it was an inability to form intimate relationships of any kind.
Yeah.
Uh, and when Itto told me that she loved me, it was transformative for me because I had never been the recipient of that before.
Mm.
Um, and I think it was also powerful for her because she was never in the position to dictate that she loved someone. I mean, she had to say no a lot, but
Yeah.
she never like um I'll let you get into that. But um anyway, to make the long story short, uh it was working with Itto on her memoir that restored my faith in the power of stories, which is
Mm.
a faith that has now it's returned to its place as one of the cornerstones in my life. So yeah,
Mm.
that's my story in a nutshell.
Wow. Wow. And Ito, your memoir, "Blindness is the Light of My Life," this comes from a very big story as well, right? You guys have both been through so much. So I'll let Ito share her story, how you got from where you were to where you are now.
Thank you. So I'm Itto Outini, originally from Morocco. For those who don't know where Morocco is, it's in North Africa. I am from the Atlas Mountains. Both of my parents died when I was very young, and I was kind of raised by my family members. There was a lot of emotional, psychological, and physical abuse. I was not allowed or able to go to school at an early age. But one good thing that was helping is the storytelling. And as Mekiya said, we didn't have books. We had access to oral storytelling that was passed through generations.
Yeah.
So I loved stories as a kid. As a matter of fact, I hated the nighttime. I thought it was a waste. Every time when the night came, I was like, okay, this is again like everything had a solution where, like, you can manage to cook different meals every day or whatever, but the night was just showing up every day. And it kind of pissed me off as a kid. I'm like, and so the beating or like anger from my family members wouldn't help. The only thing that helped was story. Like if someone wanted me to sleep, they would say, "Can you come? I will tell you a story." And I didn't know that I had like a storyteller and a writer and editor's mind when I was a kid. I was really unhappy when they had the same characters, the same stories. I would say, "No, I know that one already. I want something else." Um, so of course, then I was mostly on my own because, like as I said, my parents, my mom died earlier and my father abandoned me. But I told stories to animals and nature and just going around telling stories. And at the age of 17 was when I first went to school for the first time. That's when my life changed. I started school from the 7th grade, and then instead of 12 years, I was able to get a high school degree in less than 6 years and went on to the university where I studied English literature and then applied linguistics. And in 2017, I was awarded the Fulbright Scholarship to come to the US to pursue an MA in journalism. I worked as a journalist in Morocco and in the US. I love stories. I love journalism, and I love books. I'm addicted to books. I think everyone has to be addicted to something, and glad I'm addicted to books. I think some
Pick your
people might,
poison, I guess.
yeah, some people might be like, "That's too much," but I'm okay. Like, it's an addiction that doesn't really hurt anyone. So I think it's a good one. Yeah.
That is amazing. Education being a big driving force for you really kind of helped you come out of some of the horrible situations that you were in too, right? Like getting that education was kind of your way of getting your life back, is kind of how I've heard it on some of the interviews and the pieces of your memoir. Like this really catapulted you into a new place. What was that about education that really gave you kind of this sense of who you were and this freedom to pursue all of this, separateness from the violence and the things that you were enduring?
So one thing that I saw in the first time, like my first week, I guess, or like even day in the blind school, I am totally blind, by the way, was that a lot of blind people were complaining, and I am not that person. I want actions. I don't want to just sit there and complain. If I did, countries like Morocco are known for pity and sympathy. Basically, I could have been a beggar on the street, go to people, they would give me money and food, and I would just live like that, which is a choice that a lot of people in my case would make. But instead, I chose to use my power and my skills and my ability and seek something greater than what I had. So, of course, education was the way and the only way for me to move forward. And I poured everything I had, energy, time, everything in education. And I've educated myself. And of course, sometimes it's really hard to come across as a proud person because pride is not good, right? But I always, I'm always grateful for what I've accomplished. I don't think I'm a person who likes free things. I love to work hard and see what I've accomplished. I grew up in the mountains where I did a lot of farming, and I see life like that. And we didn't have machines. We had to do everything by hand, using animals and plows. So basically, if you want to harvest something, let's say corn, it takes you a year of work before you get to harvest it. And sometimes you don't even harvest it because of the weather. So I built my view or my approach to life from that experience. And I don't excuse complaining. I don't excuse blaming others or the circumstances. It is possible if I have accomplished things that other people can too.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, thank you for naming that. Like, you don't want to sound proud, but I think it's very important to be proud of your accomplishments, recognizing that, your strength is there, that you took the resiliency, the time, and Mekiya kind of touched on his story where he was saying, you actually at some point kind of got burnt out almost. It sounds like you weren't even sure why you were continuing on and what was the point of this. And that's kind of more of that almost a depressive state, or depression and anxiety maybe mixed together, where you kind of are questioning. It wasn't so much the driving force as it was for Itto. How did you, Mekiya, pull yourself out of that enough to at least continue on? Because you're at a beautiful place now and you've accomplished, those goals, and you've moved forward in so much. But what was it like for you when none of it really mattered? It wasn't making sense anymore.
Yeah, well, I think for me, it would have been the driving force, but this was another way in which my parents influenced me. I think it's complicated, but
Yeah.
they told me a lot of lies, and so I stopped trusting my own ability to discern the truth
Mm.
because I believe they're lies. But I'm
Yeah.
also a very honest person. So I was saying things that were actually untrue, but I fully believed them, and they were not. They were the increasingly they were not matching up with the world as I was perceiving it. So I was no longer trusting my own perceptions. They also, um, they, while in certain select ways they have demonstrated themselves to be hardworking people, in general, they don't believe in the value of hard work because for them, hard work is hard work operates within a system that is itself invalid, and therefore hard work can really only reinforce like the capitalist system that they're part of. And yes, there is, not all of the effort we put in will yield the results that we want, and sometimes we'll play into other people's hands. But they took that to a bit of an extreme,
Mm.
and because of that, I took that to an extreme too. But that was always it never it never made perfect sense to me because I also felt this impulse to keep like learning to I wanted to be a writer from a very early age. So it took a lot of cognitive dissonance to burn me out. It was not something that happened easily.
Yeah.
And the thing that got me going again was feeling loved because that was something that I had lacked for a long time without even knowing. I mean, I knew, but I was conditioned to not trust my own perception on that as well. So yeah, I think there's a lot of power in finding love. Itto found that she loved herself first, and that for her was a revolutionary moment, and that took a lot. And I was raised by two people who didn't love themselves and who I think instilled that in me at a very deep level, even though they didn't intend to.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
and so it's been a struggle for me to learn how to love myself, but that I would say that's the thing that um is keeping me going now is I've re I've found again the love that I had in writing and storytelling and books.
Mm.
I'm also finding a new way of loving and relating to myself and to Itto as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, when someone doesn't really love themselves, like your parents, they really don't have the capacity to love you in a way that affirms that you are lovable. And so why would
Right.
you love yourself if no one's ever showed you that you're lovable? And I hear so much isolation in your story. Um, and in Ito's story, I'm hearing also a bit of isolation because being in the mountains, correct me if I'm wrong, had you not learned to read until had lost your sight, which was due to some of the violence that you've gone through. But then did you first learn how to read later in life in Braille?
Yes, so I didn't know how to read and write until I was 17.
Yeah.
Uh, my first day in school, my teacher asked me how to spell my name, and I said, "Oh, don't worry, you don't really have to spell it." So that's how like dumb I was at 17.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
But see, to me, I still hear the threads of isolation there, right? Keeping a child, out of school or school not being available, no matter what the circumstance is, school and learning and being able to learn about the world around you and how the government works and how this works and how that works, but also being around children your age and then like like Mekiya said, like you didn't even have any point of reference of what was normal in a family. So I wonder if you struggled with that, Itto, as well, being because you were passed around to multiple different family members, right? A lot of it was very abusive and very violent. Did you know that this was not acceptable, or were you so isolated that you weren't even sure? You didn't have that point of reference like Mekiya didn't.
I was aware that I was isolated and unloved, but I think one thing that is something that I knew even as a kid was that those were not my parents. Whatever they did, it's not that it was acceptable, like, oh my God, it was the best, but it was, I guess, normal, if that makes sense. Like, yeah, my family abused me, but they were strangers at the end of the day. They were not my parents. It's actually funny working on a piece about how grateful I am because my parents died. Because I have seen some people who are or were not loved and were abused by their own parents. For me, because it wasn't my parents, I think it was easier.
Not easy, but easier.
Yeah, like I was like, okay, these are their kids. Of course they love them better. They love them better than me. They would protect them, but not me. And things like that. So I was aware that I was nobody's child. So, and in Morocco, families are very close. So when I went to school, of course, it was a big challenge because the other students had their families, but I didn't have a family. I was called an orphan and like basically every name. But all my sighted teachers, it was sad that I would say all my blind teachers were very not, they were not the best. They were not supportive at all. But all my sighted teachers were supportive and they replaced the family. They gave me everything I needed. Wow. And because of them, I built strong foundation and self-confidence and hard work and all of that.
Yeah, the both of you, I hear so much resiliency from even your childhood years. You kind of were, you're being yelled at by your father, like you said, multiple times a week for hours and hours and hours, and you're just having to listen to that, and it's really programming your mind. And you really could have walked away with absolutely, no self-worth and no self-confidence, really low self-esteem, and you've really come back to this place of being able to love yourself. And Itto, I hear that in your story as well, that you knew enough that you were valuable, even if these family members treated you so harshly, and you can't expect everyone to love you, but you certainly can love yourself. And I think that's really beautiful because there's a lot of resiliency thread there. And it's almost like just to get to the next day, to get to the next step, just to get to the next place, because around the corner might be true love. It might be freedom. It might be a way out. It might be an education, right? That can really change your life, a mentor that meets you in that place. And I just think that that's really, really beautiful. When you guys met, tell us a little bit about how you met, how you fell in love.
Well, how we met is different than how we fell in love.
Oh, we'll take them both.
Stories, but
yeah,
different.
Yeah. So I've been in the US for 7 years. We met my second day in the US. But of course I don't remember because everything was new. I was meeting at least 300 people a day.
You hadn't slept in like 3 days.
Yeah, I hadn't slept and I was really like trying to learn. Everything was new, like rent, utilities, which I never had in Morocco, my own apartment before.
Wow.
Like everything was new and navigating grad school, learning how to like the whole thing. But just for their not for the like to acknowledge what the Fulbright has done to me.
Yeah.
It is the for me, sorry.
Prepositions suck.
Yeah.
Prepositions are the worst.
But yeah, what the Fulbright has given me is a priceless gift, basically. When I landed here, my Fulbright advisor literally landed in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and stayed with me and helped me all the way from like how to shop, how to set a bank account, which again, I never had before, and introduced me to my professors, helped with like attend my orientations. And basically, if it weren't for the Fulbright, maybe I'd be dead by now. It is, I wouldn't say one of the best, but the best organization in the world. And even if I was not awarded the Fulbright scholarship, I ended up somehow becoming who I am today and read about them, I will still form the same opinion about the organization. I am positive there is some subjectivity in there, but I am a person who is, it's really hard for me to be convinced by, for example, advertisements or whatever, like just read about, because of my experience about an organization or whatever, and say, wow, this is good. But the Fulbright program is unique, and it is the best out there.
That is really beautiful. I love that. So you met, but then you kind of you didn't really even remember it. You've just met a million different people. So how does this translate into all these years later now in this relationship?
Well, so from my side, the first minute I started talking to Itto, of course I remembered her because totally blind, Fulbright scholar from Morocco, speaks a bunch of languages, was homeless for 6 years, and now is like one of the most prestigious scholars in the world. And that sticks in your mind,
Yeah,
especially if you,
yeah,
especially
I would say it would.
right, especially if you have an interest in stories. And I didn't know much about her story, but what I knew was enough to pique my interest. So we just happened to sit next to each other at this dinner. I was working at the time for, I wasn't a teacher, but I was working for a language school that was, their main mission was to teach international students English or improve their English, but they also ran a bunch of other programs, including an orientation program for Fulbright Scholars, which is the one she was part of. And I was the driver and the cultural ambassador at that welcome dinner. So that's how we met. And then I would see her around the halls because the English department and the journalism department were housed in the same building. But of course, she wouldn't see me. And I never like went up and said hi because I didn't want to be intrusive. But and I just got the sense that given her personality, probably a lot of people like stalk her and and want to be part of a cult personality. And I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna do that. But we did have a bunch of mutual friends in common, and people kept trying to get us to meet each other, and it kept not working and not working. And finally, it did. One mutual friend got us connected so that I could help her edit her thesis, and from there we got to be friends, and our friendship got like gradually deeper. We were talking about books and ideas, and at that point, like Itto had that a lot in Morocco, but was kind of starved for that in the U.S., right?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
So I didn't realize it at the time, but I guess I was one of the only people in the U.S. that she had to talk to about those things. So then eventually that ended up translating into us getting together. And like I said, Itto was the one who started it because at that point I had given up on the idea of being in an intimate relationship, and she had too, but for different reasons. I don't know if you want to tell the story or I can tell it. Yeah, okay. So for me, I had been thoroughly convinced that I was not worthy of being in a relationship, and I had nothing to offer at that point. So I was like, you know what? It's not ethically sound of me to continue even asking for the intimacy from people. So I need to stop doing that, which was a difficult thing to impose on myself, but I tried and tried and eventually imposed that on myself. And for Itto, she'd seen some examples of loving relationships, but she'd seen far more examples of violent and abusive ones, and had just decided like, it's not for me. I love myself. I'm not gonna like ever try to, involve myself with someone else because that can only end badly. And looking back, I'm really honored to be the person who inadvertently and without my own like conscious involvement convinced her otherwise. But I think also, yeah, I think there was an importance in, usually it's script is that the man starts the relationship, I guess, but I think it was important for both of us for different reasons that she be the one to start it, because for her that was, exercising the agency that a lot of people would have denied her, and for me it was somebody expressing love for me, even in a circumstance where there was risk, which it was actually convincing to me in a way that I'd never really been deeply convinced when other people said they loved me, because it was shallow. It didn't have a whole lot behind it.
That's a great way to put that. That's a really beautiful way to think about that. She needed to be able to express agency and you be able to accept that someone actually really cared about you in that way. That is a beautiful, beautiful tie-in to you guys finding each other. It sounds like the path was there. It just needed to continue to get carved out. And now you guys are together and married. And now you have started your DateKeepers media. Tell us about this. What's the vision behind this? What's the mission for DateKeepers?
It's actually more than just media. DateKeepers is a hub for writers and creators. So basically, our goal is to bring people together and give a platform to people who wouldn't have it otherwise. We're lucky enough to have a large audience from all over the world, and I'm sure a lot of people don't have that. A lot of authors, especially now, the more publishing platforms emerge, the tougher it gets for writers to publish their work.
Ironically.
Traditionally, like journalism specifically, like the traditional media platforms are dying. A lot of journalists think and believe if they cannot find opportunities to work at, the New York Times or the Washington Post or whatever, there's no way to do something else. So it is like, for me, it's a passion, and it's something that, again, I wish someone started it and I was part of it years ago. But I'm glad I am here and we both started it.
And in terms of what we do, we're trying to synthesize a few different things. We both offer a complementary set of services, like they complement one another. And Itto does more like book coaching, helping authors like develop, especially memoirists, develop their manuscripts and figure out how to navigate sensitive issues in those manuscripts, and then also figure out how to market them. And I do more like granular editing. Like we both do developmental editing, which is like the conceptual level, but I do like structural editing, which is how to put the book together, and line editing and proofreading. So together we offer this full spectrum of services to writers and authors. We also have the platform where we publish short form nonfiction, and we also have a friends page where we're promoting a lot of people in our network. And the friends page does not just, it's got designers, it's got entrepreneurs, it's got lawyers, it's got public policymakers, people working in all these different fields. And we have on the media platform, we've profiled some of the scientists and some of the people working in policy and some of the entrepreneurs, because part of our vision for this platform too is to try to use storytelling as a way to elevate people who are doing interesting work but maybe have not gotten a lot of attention for it, and then thereby also foster interdisciplinary collaborations, because a lot of cool stuff happens when you have people working in different fields, approaching similar problems from different angles. And we're hoping eventually to become a platform where a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds and fields come together and can sample one another's work and be like, oh, I think I have some common interests that overlap with this person who's in this country working in this field. I think I'll reach out to them, and then we can facilitate an introduction. So that's part of what we're aiming toward as well.
That's beautiful. Great, great. The importance of telling story, the importance of being able to have a place where you can pursue your passion, if it is journalism and writing. This is a beautiful community that you're forming. And like Itto said, she wishes that she had something like this to join long ago. And so instead she just created it with her husband, because why not? Because when there's a need, right? That's amazing. There's a need. Let's just go and fill it. So thank you guys for not only the work that you're doing, but for telling your own stories, because I think that is bringing so much hope to people to understand, listen, even if you've been through things, you can keep moving forward. And in this case, memoirs coming out and, having the opportunity to really tell your story and be heard. Itto, I heard your interview on the BBC. It was really beautiful. It goes into a lot more detail about your story. And I think that there's so much importance in people telling their stories, especially like you said, you called it the sensitive parts, right? Of maybe naming someone who hurt you or injured you, right? And like, oh, do you want to put that in a published work? Yeah, you can though, because it's your story. And so I really appreciate that work that you guys are doing. Before I let you go, I just want to ask, and you've listed some beautiful things already between some of your teachers and finding each other. What were some of the resources, maybe one or two from both of you, that were really helpful in your healing journey as you've come, Mekiya into the place of self-love, and Itto coming here and becoming just so accomplished in your work? What has been maybe a couple of things that have been really catalyst in that healing journey?
Yeah, I can go first. For me, books, but I don't have a specific book or even like a list of 5 books because I think reading itself is a tool.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of the reason that I did not end up addicted to substances the way my parents did.
Yeah.
And it might seem a little counterintuitive, but by the time I was old enough to have access to substances, I already knew there was another better way to access another like world, another like experience of reality.
Yeah.
And even when I got to grad school and I got so burnt out and sort of hit that high pitch of despair and did start experimenting with drugs, it was always like, yeah, this is the off-brand version. Like this is not the really good stuff. Like the really good stuff is in the books. I just can't access that right now. And
Wow.
there's like reading immersively is a
Mm.
transformative experience. Of course, there are books that you can read and you can take away something that's not helpful to you or that is actively unhelpful. But the great thing about stories, unlike chemicals, is that the stories are flexible. So we can absorb a really dysfunctional set of ideas or a really dysfunctional ideology, and then we can process that out of our systems too and replace it with something better. And it
Mm.
will transform us, but it won't transform us permanently if we don't let it.
Hmm.
So yeah, I would say books as a category are
Yeah.
great. And I don't have a specific one I can recommend because every book is going to have a different effect on a different person. The
Yeah.
books that are meaningful to me, that it's kind of, you would read them and you'd be like, wait, why did this help you get to that? Like one of the books that I cite as transformative in my like experience of like realizing that my parents' story is full of holes and that
Yeah.
my story, that I need to change my own story that I'm telling. It's a book about the ways that organic matter may have evolved from inorganic matter, and it's like really heavy on systems theory, really technical, nothing to do with processing trauma, nothing to do with family narratives. And the way my brain made that connection was maybe particular to me. So
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say like you should read this book or you should read that book, but just read, just immerse yourself.
I love that. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Anito.
Reading, writing, and letting go to toxic relationships. I am always, a lot of people see it as a bad thing when you say let go to toxic relationships. A lot of people say, no, you should try to fix things. I do try to fix things, but if they're not fixable, you can't fix a broken glass.
Yeah.
Throw it and move on.
Yeah.
I'm really good at like, because I've worked so hard to develop self-love, I am good at letting go to things that are not healthy for me, whether relationships or even opportunities. If it's not good for me, I'm not going to take it. And I love reading and writing every day. I listen to pop music a lot, which is weird, something that I listened to back in Morocco a lot. And I'm grateful a lot of people didn't speak English to know what songs I was listening to, which was good. um,
Oh, that
but
is
yeah.
beautiful. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. What an interesting take, I think, Mekiya, on the books versus drugs. What an interesting way to kind of think about, yeah, you get to digest what you want, but it's not like you can remove, oh, I don't want my leg to feel this drug. That's not how that works. So that's a really, really interesting take there. Anito, I love the fact that you recognize that for some people, I don't understand why this is a controversial topic, but it is. You're right. Letting go of people who do not serve you and who are actually harming you is the healthiest thing that you can do. And that does really speak to self-love. And it is such a controversy. I see it on social media all the time people want to say no, and especially if they're your family and they want to get into fights on the internet about this.
Yeah.
It's it definitely is a nuanced, very gray area. It seems like it's black and white, but it's not, because it's so hard to do, right? So people think it's like one day someone just crosses a line with you and boom, you never talk to them again. No, that's that black and white thinking. The gray in between is all of the opportunities for repair.
I have no problem supporting people if there's actually a real reason to support.
Yeah.
But like it was really bad, and I said no, I'm gonna. So I left a lot of like bad habits, because like toxic things are not only people; they can be habits, they can be, as I said, opportunities. They can be everything. Like even self-hatred is toxic.
Yeah.
And I
Absolutely.
think we should change the narrative around that.
Mm.
There's nothing wrong with don't hate people, don't hate things, but let go if needed.
Yeah, I love that. Let go if needed. That's right. Very true. Itto and Mekiya, thank you so much for joining us today. Please tell people where they can find you, where they can find the memoir that's out, and how they can reach out to you if they're interested in getting to know more about DateKeepers.
Whether they can find us on LinkedIn, Itto Outini, Mekiya Outini, or the DateKeepers.
Yes.
And if they want to know about the memoirs or other books that we are publishing, they can subscribe to our newsletters, whether on LinkedIn or the datekeepers.com.
Beautiful. Excellent. And I'll have all that and your resources linked in the show notes below. You both have a wonderful story. You've come out finding love for yourselves and for each other, which is really beautiful. And I just want to thank you for sharing your story and taking the time to tell us about that journey today. So you guys take care of yourself. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to or watching this episode of the Trauma Survivorhood podcast. Please subscribe, like, share, and follow. For any information that was discussed in this podcast episode, check out the show notes below. Until next time, be well.